I was talking here earlier to a brother who was talking about the fact that we describe these issues a great deal. We talk about them and we analyze them, and we rarely get a chance to talk about solutions. Well, we've been working on solutions. We're going to talk about power not from the point of view of being victimized by it, but by developing it and using it against our enemies. At the last lecture I gave at the Slave Theater, where we were talking about global white supremacy, I initiated this theme on power by saying that we can explain the reasons Europeans victimize us in as many ways as we would like. We could talk about them as being ice people, as against the sun people, and that explanation is valid. I have no problems with it. We can talk about them in terms of their protecting their more recessive genes against our more dominant genes. We can even get into a little psychoanalysis and deal with the myth of length of penises and penis envy and all the other things, and black balls and white balls and brown balls and black holes and white balls rolling into black holes and things of this nature. And all that's fine. That's a lot of fun. But no matter how you explain why or how the European got to the point of victimizing us, I think the essential issue is that the European victimizes us because he can, because he has the power to do so. And we are victimized because we haven't developed the power to prevent his doing so. So in a sense, no matter how we explain why he does what he does, at the end point, he does what he does because he can. And consequently then, I infer from this that we can end his victimization of us when we end his power to do so. And consequently, I want to bring into the domain of discussion in this community the subject matter of power. I want us, in addition to studying black history and culture, to study power, its accumulation, its use and application. We should talk about it every day and everywhere. And we should read about it, and we should develop the means of using it. We should come to understand the nature of how white power is organized. In the end, power does not flow from the genes of white folk. Does that not flow from their ice age? It flows from the nature of their organization and the way they have chosen to relate one to the others. And it flows from their intentionality as a people and their appropriate organization of themselves to realize their intentionality, one of which is, of course, the domination of African people. And that means then that we as African people must study the rules of organization. We must study the means of relating one to each other in such a way that we multiply our power. And we must study our enemy's organization such that we can probe that organization and destroy the power of the enemy. And we can do it.
The white man in America is like Pharaoh in Egypt. He, the modern Pharaoh, is trying to control the 22 million so-called American Negroes as Pharaoh did the Israelites in Egypt. The white man's control over the so-called Negroes makes them helpless in trying to follow Allah and his servant into the land they call their own, and where they can rule themselves and other nations are doing. Where they can rule themselves as other nations are doing. The so-called Negroes are deceived in thinking their future in America would be a great one. They should accept their own and try to do something for themselves as other nations are doing on land that they call their own. They have intelligence, but do not have the desire to do for themselves. Consequently, the white man of America is helping them to continue to have such foolish desires. He wants to keep the so-called Negroes looking up to the white American for what he wants. The so-called Negroes are disgracing themselves, lying at the feet of the white man and begging him to accept them as equals and sharing the wealth of America. It is against the very nature and disposition of the slave master to accept his once slave as his equal or to share equality with slave in his wealth. Therefore, the ignorant so-called Negro who has never gone to school is now showing himself to be wiser in his acceptance of Allah and his true religion of Islam than the learned of our people. The poor among our poor desire to be white through intermixing with the white man and sharing his wealth. They prove to be even more ignorant than the learned in their fascination with gaining the enemy's wealth and power and their desire to trust the white man's power and wealth instead of acquiring permanent houses and wealth that Allah has offered. This makes them look very ignorant in the eyes of the civilized world. Happy Monday, happy Monday, happy Monday. Welcome back to On the Shoulders of Giants. I am Joseph Ward, and I'm continuing my reading of Elijah Muhammad's message to the black man in America. And this is the chapter, Persecution of the Righteous. And it goes from pages 206 to 219, from pages 206 to 219. Short chapter, so this will be a short video. But persecution of the righteous. But as you can see, I started with the clip of Dr. Amos Wilson talking about power, because that's what we're getting into. The overall tone of this chapter is power, having power versus not having power. And what I'll be reading will be explanations of what happens to a group of people who don't have power and who are expecting, I guess, help, who is expecting help from their oppressors or from the people who enslaved them, and a group of powerless people demanding that their needs get met by the powerful. It doesn't really work out unless the powerless people are able to build power. And that's what Dr. Amos Wilson was getting at, being able to build power, collective power. Well, we know one of our greatest hurdles to becoming a powerful people is we don't trust each other. We've brought into the narratives. We've brought into the nonsense. We've brought into the lies. Too many of us really believe the lies that are told about each other from whether it's within the black community, whether it's from the left, from the right, from whoever. We believe the lies, and the lies help tear us apart. We argue and debate about any and everything. We act like we don't understand that it's okay to disagree and still be cool. We don't have to agree on everything. And if we don't agree on everything, that's fine. We can still be friends. We can still be cool. And we can still work together. We can still love each other. We can still show love. We can still respect each other. And that word, respect, is going to be a theme for this video. We don't respect each other. A lot of us don't respect ourselves. So we don't get respect from the outside. In order to get respect from the outside, you have to have respect coming from the inside. We have to respect ourselves. Respect helps to build unity. Unity helps to build power. When we have power, we can get things done. We can get what we need. We can get our needs met. Matter of fact, we can become self-sufficient. Powerful people are not dependent on another group of people. And powerful people don't have to beg to get their needs met. We often beg to get our needs met. Why? Because we don't, say it with me, everybody say it together, we don't have power. So let's get our minds right and let's wrap our minds around how do we as Black Americans build the power we need so we can get our needs met, because nobody's coming to save us. So picking back up on page 209, we seek truth and justice. America knows that under her flag, we have received nothing but hell, beatings and killings without due process of the law, day and night, not only in the past, but in the present. She wants to make some so-called Negroes believe that the religion of Islam can be thrown out the window if they turn hypocrites themselves and trying to make democracy work. This is done only to deceive the so-called American Negroes. But I say to everyone who reads this book that Islam is here among the Black people of America to stay as long as their life is in their bodies. The God of Islam is with me and will back me and others who are working hard to deliver people from such evil and merciless race of from a much evil and merciless race of devils. What glory and honor does a so-called Negro get under the stars and stripes? No honor, no glory, only hell. We have proof of this by their so-called courts of justice. There's no justice in you, and this America knows. She would like to hurt every one of you and make you like it. It pleases her to do you evil. So you see, Elijah Muhammad is, and this is explaining how America, how he sees America has treated us over the years, right? What he's explaining is what happens to powerless people. What he's explaining is people who are at the mercy of others. The laws. We don't control the laws. We don't control the police. We don't control any aspect of true protection. We don't control any aspect of true manufacturing. We don't control any aspect of true entertainment or anything that we're a part of. What's interesting is when we become a part of these various fields or various entities, organizations, structures, whatever, when we become a part of them, we excel within them. But what's interesting is when Black people, when we create our own stuff, and this is one thing we've been talking about, well, we got to really address it when we're talking about building power. Part of building power is owning things, right? So Black businesses, when we own Black businesses, in order to build the businesses and grow the businesses, a couple of things have to happen. The business has to get support from the Black community. No matter what, the Black community has to support the business, but the business has to, you got to do your job. You got to show up. You got to do good business. You can't be doing Negro business. It can't be subpar. The business that the Black people provide can't be subpar. You can't just whatever. You can't just give us whatever type of service and treatment because we're all Black. No, that's not how we build power. That business won't thrive. It won't thrive. It's on a downward spiral, and it's only going to last so long. And then therefore, we've lost another Black business. We've lost more access to wealth for the community as a whole, for those people, their families. Access to wealth is gone. A greater access to wealth is gone because the business has fallen apart because the business wasn't taken care of. The service that the business provides has to be top-notch, and the customer base has to give top-notch customer support. Customers have to be there and the business have to be there. It's a relationship. We have to relearn how to relate with each other and see the bigger picture of group dynamics, of racial politics, and why we need to work together. That's where Elijah Muhammad is getting at. Well, that's what we will be getting at throughout this. That's what, well, let me restate that. That's what I'm saying in regards to what I read that Elijah Muhammad is saying. Now, peep this. The Monroe, Louisiana Southern courts, with their Southern judges of hatred, are thirsty to take their own law of justice, twist it up, and throw it back upon the shelf. And when they look, they see a poor, innocent so-called Negro begging for justice, and his grandparents and their great-grandparents, before as far back as 400 years ago, who received nothing but the spitting of anger and threats of murder from the judges throughout the courts of America, just to mention justice for a so-called Negro in the South is an insult to the judge, who is supposed to be the judge of right and wrong between the state and opposing the attorneys. He becomes a more vicious enemy against the poor so-called Negro than the prosecuting attorney when he sees a so-called Negro before him. The so-called Negroes do not have justice under the law, not only in the South, but anywhere in America. As I plainly stated in Washington, D.C. in 1959, in the Uline Arena before 10,000 people, everything has failed us as far as justice is concerned. The Justice Department in Washington, the churches, the priests, and the preachers all have failed the so-called Negroes, and the so-called Negroes have failed themselves as well. So as he's laying out, he's saying the Justice Department is not for us, it's against us. America has always been against us. Justice has never truly been served in America for the black people in America. As they say, the so-called Negro. Justice has never been truly served. And why would justice be truly served for a group of people that the dominant society sees as less than? Justice will not be served. There's no justice, there's no equality. Those are things that we have to take. Those are things that we have to that we have to create by becoming powerful, by becoming united, by loving each other, by liking each other, by working together, by building together, by trusting each other. You know, justice is taken, it's demanded. It's something that comes with power, it's something that comes with respect. Nations of people who are respected by others, they get justice. Think about the individual instances of things that can happen to different races or groups of people in America who are backed by countries, who are backed by strong, powerful groups of people. You do anything, the slightest of things to them, and justice happens. Swift justice happens, especially to us. Ask Nick Cannon. Look at the Nick Cannon situation. Nick Cannon said something, or Nick Cannon had the interview with Professor Griff, and the people who controlled his money, who were in power over his money, didn't like it, and they took it away. For the slightest thing, justice, they gave the justice that they could for the slightest thing, because they are together. They're organized, they're codified. They'll get that word again, that code, they're codified. So by the help of Allah and the blood of the original man, whose father is the originator, I, Elijah Muhammad, will fight for the cause to get our people justice in America. And by the help and power of Allah, the power that is in the universe, the power that is in the nation of Islam, and the power of every atom that is bound in the planet Earth and that is bound in other planets. What angers America is just the idea of her 400-year-old slave not wanting to go over to the paradise of freedom, justice, and equality under the crescent of the divine religion of Islam, where they will have sincere brotherhood and friends throughout the civilized world. So he believes that America is doing its best to keep the black man out of Islam, away from Islam. You know, which is also a metaphor for keeping black people away from uniting, right? Now, I'm under the belief that white America has done a great job of conditioning us and conditioning America. So I don't believe black America is white America's greatest target right now, but I do believe that the conditioning that we have had for over 400 years and the conditioning that has been placed upon America for over 400 years, the system is already set in place. It's on autopilot. So black people, those of us who buy into the white supremacy conditioning, we're going to continue to destroy ourselves and our communities. And those who buy into white supremacy are going to continue the system of white supremacy. And we don't have a place at the table. We never had a place at the table. So everything is set in place. Now, I believe that we're not white America's greatest target right now because we don't have any power. Like we're not organized. Like if you think back in the 50s and 60s, they went after organized groups of people. They went after people who had some semblance of power, some semblance of organization and unity behind them, who were able to spark ideas into people and get people to rally behind them and get people to just rally together and work together and say, hey, if we work together, we can do something different. So that goes into us being able to protect ourselves, because what I'm going to be reading is a lot of stuff where we're in positions to where we can't protect ourselves. But let me get into it. So page 211, under where Muslims framed to whitewash the guilty. So you may know of the incident that took place on April 27th, 1962 in Los Angeles, California, between the Los Angeles policemen and my followers. One of my followers, Ronald T.X. Stokes, was eliminated outright while his hands were raised and with nothing on him to do any harm. Every one of the brothers were unarmed, and nearly 100 policemen swooped down upon them, well armed, out of the darkness in the night to eliminate the brothers, the believers of Allah and his religion, and stop the spread of Islam. On that fateful night, one of the policemen's bullets paralyzed one of the brother for life and received serious wounds in the chest and private areas. They were all shot down for no reason other than the devils wanted to eliminate the righteous, as they have done in the past to the prophets and followers from Moses to Muhammad. And after shooting down the 6 unarmed worshippers of Allah, and with one eliminated, they felt happy to boast about they had eliminated one of my followers. The same devil policeman who eliminated that follower said he shot the others and was trying to eliminate them all. Again, the same devil was not wounded or even scratched by any of the Muslims who were not armed and had nothing with which to resonate against, to retaliate against such a sudden attack by the murderers of our fathers and mothers, and now the murderers of us. For 32 years, I have been trying to teach my people, the so-called American Negroes, the way of peace. And I have a record just that long in trying to live in peace with our open enemies. I have even warned my followers never to be the aggressors, as the religion of Islam teaches us that we cannot teach peace and then be the first to break peace with carnal weapons. I know who the fight belongs to. It belongs to Allah, God. So once again, he's giving his perspective, and he's giving some history of things that have happened to the Nation of Islam and attacks by officers of the law. These attacks are coming because they were seen as a threat. So the idea is, if these people are seen as a threat, we have to neutralize them so they won't become powerful. So this is an example of what happens when a group is seen as having some sort of power. What's happening today? What's happening to us today? Similar to that, to where the white supremacists are going above and beyond to make sure that they dismantle organizations or put people in their place, because we're getting too powerful. We're getting too united. Something as simple as a social media post will eliminate all of the unity that we believe we have. And that's a problem. Keep black women thinking that they should hate black men. Keep black men thinking that they should hate black women. Have black men becoming passport bros. Have black women become divestors. Have black women believe that they should only be looking for the money in a man. Have a man think that he should only be looking for the sex in a woman and service from a woman. Have them believe all of the negative characteristics about each other and watch how they don't grow together. Have them believe that family isn't important. You don't need a man. You don't need a woman. Children don't need their parents. Where in history have children needed their parents? Children have thrived throughout the human history without their parents. Why should children need their parents now? That's how we sound. We've been duped. We've been tricked, bamboozled, hoodwinked, run amok. However you want to say it, we got. And because of that, we ain't even close to having power, which is the problem. 1 year later, here in Chicago, Illinois, in the police court on 11th Street and on 11th and State Street, there was a complaint made against one of my followers concerning his children going to our school, the University of Islam. As the courtroom begins to fill with spectators, 2 court deputies showed disrespect to the Muslim women. They started pushing them around, and the Muslim brothers resented this harsh handling of the women. The police officers then began beating the men, and almost within seconds, the entire courtroom was in confusion and fight. When the battle was over, the police captain lay dead from a heart attack, and others were wounded by their own gunfire. They opened fire upon my followers point blank in the courtroom because of their seeking justice in the charge made against us and our school, as in Detroit, Michigan, the previous year. In Detroit, the police department charged us with contributing to the delinquency of minors involving one of our students, Sally Allah, who had left the public school and came over to the University of Islam. They charged us with going around to the various school grounds, begging our poor black children to leave the white schools and come over to their own. This is when they made the charge of contributing to the delinquency of minors. The records are in Chicago to date for anyone to read. Now, 1 year later in 1935, here in Chicago, Illinois, they attacked us on nearly the same charge. They wanted to school our children. They wanted them to go to their public school. So once again, on another front, when you're seen as people with some type of power, some type of influence, some type of unity, some type of code of conduct, you're going to have some issues with the white supremacists. The white supremacist job is to dismantle any threat to their power. So us in understanding this, because we are students and stewards of history, right? How do we build power? This is a question I'm asking, but this is a question I'm asking in public that should be answered in private. How do we build power and protect what we build? Especially being behind enemy lines. Remember, we are behind enemy lines. White supremacy is a global phenomenon. So no matter where you are in the world, you are still behind enemy lines. There's the varying degrees of how far behind enemy line you are, but white supremacy is a global phenomenon. So therefore, we're always going to be behind the lines of our enemies. So how do we build power for ourselves and protect it? And I say that, keep in mind, look at some of the countries in Africa who are black ran, but have European influence. So the Europeans really run it. The Europeans really have the power. Think about some of the black nations, some of the African nations who have to pay France so many $1 billion a year. So we have our own, but we don't control our own. And that is true power. Who really controls it has the true power. If the white race were for peace, they would thank God for raising up in their midst a peaceful people who do not desire to make any mischief among them. Here we have the NAACP, CORE, and various other organizations before our eyes who attempt to try achieving their aims of asking for freedom, justice, and equality with the slave masters' children without weapons, without anything harmful. They lie down at the feet of the vicious, wicked, human-like beast, only to be kicked and stomped upon and have dogs sicked upon them to rip their flesh apart and poison them with rabbit teeth. They have no respect for people who want to be at peace with them. They have no respect for the laws of justice. They have made trouble all over the world with people who were at peace among themselves until the white shadows of the troublemakers spread out over them. We have history that they themselves have written of self, bearing witness to what I am teaching today. we must be done since we can't get along with them in peace. And so, of course, remember, Elijah Muhammad is an advocate for separation, for Black people being by ourselves, doing for self, being able to protect us. He believes that as long as we are in a subservient position as people who have no respect, we will get no respect. So we will continue to get stepped on. So we will continue to be beggars. And the only way we are no longer stepped on and no longer beggars is to do for self and raise ourselves up as a nation of people within a nation. Become a nation within a nation. Doing for self. Being able to sacrifice and give up our luxuries to do for self. What's the greater aim, the greater goal? Is it comfort within the system of white supremacy, or comfort within what we have now? Or is it true unity, true power, true autonomy, true liberation? To become a true nation of people because we've done for ourselves. We are forbidden by Allah to carry weapons. It is well known that this is our rule. No armed person is to sit in our meetings, and because of this rule, we have been successful in enjoying a peaceful assemblage wherever we have gone. But it has again been made clear by the hostile act of Flint, Michigan Police Department against our peaceful assemblage. The devils do not respect anyone's peace. Because of this, we have never, ever again permit white people to sit in our meeting armed or unarmed. This does not include the Turkish people, Chinese, Japanese, Filipinos, those of Pakistan, Arab, Latin Americans, Egyptians, and those of other Asiatic Muslims and non-Muslim nations. All Black Americans and non-whites are welcome to our mass meetings. We will soon make a try at converting and uniting all of the originals of the Western Hemisphere. All Black Americans, even those who have a few drops of Black blood in them, must unite under the crescent and try and save ourselves from the doom of the enemies who have ruled and killed us for the past 400 years, and especially during the last 400 years. For they have covered the earth and sea with their death-dealing rule over the aboriginals of the earth since they left the confines of Europe. So basically, it's like we know what we're dealing with. Because he also goes on to tell a story about how they're not letting any white people into their meetings, armed or unarmed, and that they don't let anyone in their meetings armed. And in doing so, and there was a situation where two police officers who were armed tried to come into their meetings, and they were doing their best to refuse the police officers from coming into their meeting armed because they want to keep a peaceful atmosphere. And they even went as he said, they went as far as telling the police officers that, hey, what we'll do is we'll take your arms, and if something pops off, we'll ensure that you're the first ones to get there to be able to neutralize it. But they were still going to back and forth with the police officers about being able to carry arms into their meetings, which emphasizes more a lack of power, a lack of respected power from the police officers to the Nation of Islam. Power is earned, it's gained, it's taken. Approximately 6,000 people, including 200 or 300 devils, had submitted to being searched for arms and other possessions that might be against the peaceful assembly. A Black policeman had entered but had surrendered his arms. Later on, however, two white police officers appeared claiming that their law compels them to go into all public meetings armed with that, and that their weapons were not to be given up. They insisted on coming in with arms, and upon the right to overrule those who would oppose their entering, I left in their midst of my lecture. I went to the door to speak with the haters of the so-called Negroes. I told them that if they wanted to come in, to do so as their white brothers had done, that this is to give up their weapons until dismissal. And if anyone acted other than peacefully in our meeting, we would surely let them know and they could arrest them. But this was not enough. They continued to demand entrance without being disarmed. I therefore dismissed the meeting. I could have called their bluff, but there were too many women and children in the audience. Their record of unprovoked evil attacks against our people is a long and vicious one. The attacks began in Detroit, Michigan in 1932, 33, and 34. From there to Chicago, Illinois, April in 1935, and down to the attack and the elimination of the Muslims in Los Angeles, California in April 27th, 1962. Even under the laws of America, brutal police forces beat Black people and deprived them of simple justice, including those who are in prison at the present time and those who are being sent to prison throughout the country. Untold thousands are being held in prison unjustly. Muslim prisoners are making court appeals against false charges in Monroe, Rochester, New Orleans, Attica, Damaroneea, and Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and against unjust court rulings. In upstate New York and Massachusetts, the Muslims unjustly charged with attacking the police department in a peaceful assemblage have appealed. So once again, dealing with the jockeying for power, basically what I'm saying. Jockeying for power. White supremacists are reinforcing their power, while the Nation of Islam is trying to establish power. But one force is greater than the other at this time. The Nation of Islam has power, and not just the nation. I'm thinking about Black groups throughout the years who've had power, who had influence, who caught the eye and the attention of the government. How much more powerful they could have been if Black people could see ourselves as a nation. How much more powerful Black people could be if we could see ourselves as a nation. Surely the American so-called Negroes will have God and world sympathy on their side if they would take the right steps or actions. The present actions being taken by them are wrong, for these actions consist of demanding that slave masters accept their so-called Negroes as their equals and as equal shatterers in whatever the masters has, such as social respect, which will destroy both as a people, and equal share of the government, decent housing conditions, and equal employment, not that they don't deserve it. No master of anything can accept no master of anything can accept an unequal as his equal. The law of nature is divinely respected. If they, Martin Luther King and his followers, would accept the right way, which is the belief in Allah as God and Islam as a religion, and demand a place on this earth for over 20 million or more people that they can call their own, I would demand that every one of my followers join forces in a minute. And see, that right there, that last part I just read. If they, Martin Luther King, would accept the right way, which is the belief in Allah and God and Islam as a religion, and demand a place on this earth for our 20 million people or more people that they call their own, I would demand that every one of my followers join forces in a minute. See, goes back to that quote Malcolm X had about leaving our religion and things at the door. One of the reasons why we can't build power as a nation of people, as a group of people, is some hurdles we just can't get over, right? If we can't see ourselves beyond our religious beliefs, then it's over. Got to be able to see ourselves beyond our religious beliefs. Got to. We have to unite under a code of conduct, not a religion. And if what they are asking for would be granted them, it would only be short-lived. Nothing permanent is in it for the so-called Negroes. It would be very foolish for a leader of 22 million once slaves to ask for temporary employment from their slave masters' children, who now use the 22 million for sport. But as soon as the so-called Negroes turned upon the dogs and policemen with stones, Washington, D.C. ordered the army to intervene, not to help the so-called Negroes against the white Southerners, but to help the white devils against the so-called Negroes if they tried to defend themselves. But as long as the dogs and policemen were biting and clubbing black so-called Negroes, it was all right. This clearly shows how much we are in dire need of unity. This clearly shows how much we are in dire need of unity. This clearly shows how much we are in dire need of unity, but the unity must be backed by the power of the superior to the power of our enemies. This power is in Allah and the Nation of Islam, whose arms are outstretched if we would only accept them. It is ignorant to look for heavens from the devils who only seek to take you to their doom. The Reverend King and his followers want the rights and the Constitution that the Constitution offers to white citizens, but they're learning the hard way that the Constitution does not apply to the black slaves with respect to the right to vote. Certainly, there is power in voting if there is justice for the so-called Negroes, but the crooked political machine of America can always keep the once slaves free slaves. Who prepares and teaches politics? It is not the white man who will. Is it not the white man? Who will the poor so-called Negroes vote for? Would it not be for a white man or a black man who the white would pick? We could not hope for anything but more bloodshed at the polls and seeking justice from crooked politicians. We are a nation in a nation, or we should become a nation within a nation. Why not use the 22 million people's power and today 40 million people's power for our eternal salvation instead of temporary employment with the same wicked people who murder our people? Great question. Of this grief, you and I must suffer all of the burdens we must bear. It is beyond comprehension that the American government, mistress of the sea, lord of the air, conqueror of the outer space, squire of the land, and prowler of the deep bottoms of the ocean, is unable to defend us from the assault and murder on the streets of these concrete jungles. The lynchers live right next door, down the street, up the alley, yet they are not brought to justice. What sane man can deny that it is now time that you and I take counsel amongst ourselves and end the fighting, and to the end of finding justice for ourselves? When you stand up and speak a word in behalf of your own people, you are classified as a troublemaker. You are classified as a communist, as a race hater, as everything but good. If God is revealed to me the truth of this race of people and yourself, and I tell you of it that it is the truth, then don't say that I am teaching race hatred. Just say I teach the truth. The message I bring is not for the cowards. Those of you who follow me must be ready to withstand the barbs and insults of those who come to investigate, pry, and claim that our ultimate aim is to undermine the American way of life. We have no such intentions, and our critics know it. How ironic is it that the very people who charge us with disturbing the status quo themselves go around SAing, lynching, denying citizens the right to vote, and taking in the halls of Congress to call you and me everything from a beast to an amoral entity? I have no alternative than to tell you that there is not any life beyond the grave. There is no justice in the sweet by and by. Immortality is now here. We are blessed of God, and we must exert every means to protect ourselves. We must gain power. We must become united. We must begin to like ourselves. We must begin to love ourselves. We must begin to work together. We must begin to see ourselves in a better light. We must get over our distorted view of ourselves. Our esteem, our overall esteem is absent. Going back to Dr. Joy, the group, absent esteem as a group and as individuals. Absent is esteem. How do we relearn to love ourselves? How do we relearn to see ourselves as a nation and not as our enemies? Because right now we see ourselves as our enemies. How do we see ourselves in a better light? These are things that we need to be having answers to and working towards. Seeing ourselves better so we can operate better, so we can move better as a group of people, with the full understanding that all Black people will not unite under a code of conduct, but we need a good amount. Some Black people have brought into the system of white supremacy. Some of them are gone. Some of the Negro mind state is so deeply ingrained, they're gone. Some of us are just fakers. But for those of us who care, for those of us who want better for ourselves and us as a nation, as Black people, who can see ourselves as a nation, well, we got to do something different too. We have to Make sure we're taking care of our individual lives and working together, building with the people around you. Start small and work our way out. Build with the people in your immediate space, and then continue to grow, continue to go and grow, continue to build. And we don't have to tell the world what we're doing. One thing we learned from history is we don't have to tell the world what we're doing. So we can either choose to continue to beg for equality or get our stuff together and be able to take care of ourselves. Choice is ours. So once again, that's Persecution of the Righteous, Protection of the Faithful, page 206 to 219. So for the next video, Land of Our Own and Qualifications, the Unity of 22 Million, from page 220 to 247. 220 to 247 for our next video. But for this one, you know, Black power is needed. Black unity is needed. But we know they fear Black unity. So what we gonna do? I love you all. Make sure y'all catch the next video.